Hello and welcome back to Tricolor Gaming with me, Fletcher. And welcome back to another sort of hot takes video. I did one a few weeks ago about baby dinosaurs and I was quite surprised at how popular and also the level of comments that we got from that particular video I thought was quite interesting. So I thought I would do another hot takes video, and as per the last video there won't be anything much in the background apart from me doing some off-stream decoration work for you guys to just have a look at while I'm talking with you. So just a reminder, this is pretty unscripted, so it might be a little bit looser than my normal videos, and yeah, don't forget to put a comment down below once I've gone through this with what your thoughts are. Now today's topic is the notion that the game or any future Jurassic World Evolution 3 requires bigger maps. I've seen this all over the show, in the chat section for Evo's videos, in the Reddit for Jurassic World Evolution. It's all over the show, and often many discussions about Jurassic World Evolution 3 will tend to eventually have a comment from someone saying we need bigger maps. And my hot take is we don't. And actually the idea of having bigger maps is actually quite a badly thought out idea. Like last time, I'll go through my points about why I think this. So number one is the performance factor. Bigger maps are going to result in a bigger drain on the CPU and the GPU resources. And this is a factor that I think people who repeatedly ask for bigger maps rarely consider. Consider that at the moment, the square maps we have in Jurassic World Evolution 2, they are the largest maps in the game by quite a margin. And they have huge optimization problems. If you construct a really big, fully decorated park, like the sort of standard that I would think is kind of just normal for a game like this, the maps chug. You start losing FPS quite quickly, eventually to the point where a lot of people who do build large decorated parks, like me, Evo and others, we have to shut the parks. Because if guests come in, it's too much of a drain on the resources and they lag the fuck out. That's on reasonably good PCs. A much larger map than those would lead to an even greater issue when it comes to optimization and when it comes to the sheer level of resources required to run the thing. Bigger maps will also result in higher requirements to run the game. This is something else that I think a lot of people who request bigger maps, and I bet quite a lot of them are console players, if any future game has bigger maps, and if they do a bad job of optimizing those maps, which in my opinion is probably likely considering what we've already seen with Jurassic World Evolution 2, the requirements will go up. For people who play the game on consoles, which you cannot really upgrade, once you buy a console you're stuck with it until they release the next console, which you have to buy. They have a sort of static position when it comes to hardware. So you're going to have an even worse experience if the requirements to run the game go up, and the minimum requirements for PC users will then go up, which will naturally end up with the people who are on the lowest end of machines. They'll probably end up being bumped off from being able to play it, and you're going to have a higher barrier to entry to get in. That's just on sheer resources required to run the map. Number two, again, like my first video when people were asking for baby dinosaurs and I never see an explanation as to why. Again, why do people want bigger maps? Currently, even the biggest maps are not often used, in my experience, to create brilliant, well-designed, well-decorated parks. That's extremely clear from comments I see in Evo's videos, comments on my videos, from the standard of parks I see on Reddit, and the standard of parks that I've seen being entered for things like Evo's Battle of the Builders competitions. You give people a really big map, and it seems that people really struggle to actually use it. What exactly is gained from having maps larger than beyond what we currently have? I would ask the people that want bigger maps, I would like to know how many of them build fully realized, well decorated, completed parks. Because I would bet that most people who ask for bigger parks or bigger maps don't actually build proper big parks. There is, I also think, this strange idea that we have to be able to fit every single animal on every single map. Now, when you have over 120 animals, which is what the base game has, naturally you're not going to easily be able to do this on even the square maps. Evo is doing it at the moment with her square park, with her all species park, sorry. But that's going to, you know, she's having to use only two of each species, and she's having to try squeezing them in. And it's still unknown whether she'll be able to do it and maintain the game's capacity to even work. I just don't understand the sort of motivation for bigger is therefore better. I don't understand. And this leads me on to point number 3. A carefully crafted map is always better than just sheer size. And this is in actual fact, I think it's an issue that infests a lot of open world games as well, where they focus on the size of the map as if being large makes it automatically good. But you can have something that's as large as an ocean but as deep as a puddle, because if you don't make good use of the space, then it's empty and wasted. And a badly designed huge map is not as good as a smaller, better made map. And the same applies to JWE2 Evolution 2. An imaginative, well crafted, decorative map will always be better than a huge place. The square maps are all well and good, but they're rubbish. They're square, empty, and lifeless. Whereas all of the actually well crafted maps we have in the game have far more personality to them. Good maps are made with purpose and intention. Maps like Nublar 93, or even Tacanyo from the original game. These are maps that have their own personality, that have decorative elements, that offer you challenge because they are not just huge, empty and square. You actually have to build within the confines of the space that you have, and you have to make choices. And that for me gives you much greater replayability, because you have a range of map sizes and map details and map environments, and that means you can go back to the same map and use them in different ways. The square maps arguably are so large that in a way they kind of scare people off building on them, because you really have to create your own map on the square map, which again I think is something that people don't do very often. They just try and build a park on this enormous square empty land and get bored with it. And again, this links to my next point, which is the idea of challenge. Well-made maps that don't focus on just sheer size result in more challenging experience and result in more interesting builds. And challenge is an important factor, even in a relatively sandbox-heavy game like JWE2 Evolution. Maps like Isla Pena or the Tacanyo Research Facility, they were small and annoying, but fundamentally I enjoyed building on them a lot more than perhaps I enjoy building on square maps today, because you did have to think about how you were going to construct something and make it look good in this limited space, in this difficult environment. And again, the square maps, you don't have that challenge because they're just big, empty and square. So there's no sort of, the challenge is not a driving factor, which is another reason why I think people struggle to build on the square maps, because unless you go in with a sort of dedicated idea as to what you want to have, or unless you spend some time beforehand making your own island, as I've done, as others have done, or you go in and spend some time creating a big environmental feature which you're then going to build around, you end up not having the challenge there when you're building on the map, which again I think is a reason why people get bored. One excuse I have seen for people requesting bigger maps is this idea that because Jurassic Park Operation Genesis had complete full islands where you were able to build on the entire island, Jurassic World Evolution should have the same. So I want to kind of torpedo that argument. So firstly, the Jurassic Park Operation Genesis islands, even if you maximized the space that you were available to build on, they were nowhere near as big as the current square maps. By my estimations, and I did play a hell of a lot of Jurassic Park Operation Genesis, I would say that a full JPOG island was only about half the size, maybe at best, of the current square maps. So it's not like the JPOG maps were any bigger. And like I've said in the other points, if you want a completely full island, say I've heard people requesting, oh, let's have all of Isla Nublar for us to use. Well, you're not considering the mechanical resources required to run that, like the GPU and CPU resources to run a map that scale are already going to be high, let alone before you start putting buildings on it, and before you start putting guests on it, and before you start putting dinosaurs on it. And we already know, I mean, Jurassic World Evolution 2 is not exactly a game that runs well, let's be frank. Jurassic World Evolution 2 has always run like shit. It has run like shit from day one, and it has gotten no better. Let's be fair, we can assume that for any Jurassic World Evolution 3, a lot of Jurassic World Evolution 2 is going to be copy and pasted over, because that's what they did with Jurassic World Evolution 1, and I seriously doubt there's going to be any substantial changes to the coding or the engine for any future Jurassic World Evolution 3. So I seriously doubt that the game would handle resources like the GPU and CPU better for a Jurassic World Evolution 3. I mean, there's so many background elements to the idea of we need bigger maps. The people who ask for it don't even consider. I mean, one thing I know just off the top of my head is the save file issue. So save files for games, Jurassic World Evolution 2 in particular, they are limited to a certain size. If a save file goes beyond a certain size, you won't be able to load it. That's often why if you're playing with expanded maps on and you make your map too detailed, you start running into problems. It's also why if you start having too many save files in the game's loading screen, you also run into problems. Imagine how big a save file would be saving a map the size of Isla Nublar. Like, that would be a huge amount of file size just for the empty map alone before you then start building your park in it. Do I think it's reasonable to want a completely full Nublar map or a huge island map or even bigger maps? No, not really. Again, I think people need to understand that you're not supposed to plonk every single species in the game down on every single map. You're supposed to pick and choose. I wouldn't even want to have to try to build a park on a map that is a full-sized Isla Nublar 93 map. I think even I would struggle with that, because even as someone who builds a lot of parks like I do, you do want to finish them. And if you're spending weeks and weeks decorating and building on one map, even I would start getting bored. And unlike the baby issue, I don't think any of these problems can actually be resolved. I don't think the game would ever be put in a position where it is so optimized and using resources so well that you could ever have something the size of a full-scale Isla Nublar, or even something that's a really, really, really big map. I don't think the game would ever be capable of managing that. I also don't think there are easy ways of defeating the various problems that people would then end up having trying to build on those. The idea of getting bored, the idea of struggling to know how to start, the idea that eventually you're probably going to build so much that you can't open the save, or the optimization of the game drags and you get lag. I don't think there is any easy way of solving any of those problems. I do think one possible way of solving, or semi-solving the problem, would be to not have one map for an entire island. Let's take Isla Nublar for an example. What is one possible way of solving the problem would be to have a solution where you can join individual maps together. Say you have 5 of the current games, sort of you have 5 maps that are a range of sizes that we are kind of used to from the current game, that are positioned around Isla Nublar and are all interconnected via the monorail. And you treat that a bit like Jurassic World Evolution 1's campaign. So you can move from area to area on the Isla Nublar map, but because they are all connected via the monorail, everything you put down in each of those maps is therefore accessible by the others. So you could dedicate one area just to the main buildings you need to run the parks, like the hatcheries and stuff like that, and then you can, or the fossil expedition center, that sort of thing, and then you can move to the other maps where you then build your guest zones and your enclosures and stuff. I think that's one way of metaphorically giving people the whole island without rendering the whole island at once. That way you can still have your different maps that the game can handle, but you also have the feeling that you've been given the whole island, just not all at once. And I actually think that would help people who might struggle building on the big maps as well. The idea that you have the whole map but it's divided into this series of sections would, in my opinion, help people out when it comes to building parks. One thing I would say, just as a little tag along to this, is not that we necessarily need bigger maps in any future game, but I do think more thought needs to be put into the making of the maps that we get. There are some bugbears that I really have with the way that Frontier has done their map designs for Jurassic World Evolution 2 especially. The jagged nature of the borders, for example, that waste space because they stick out in weird ways for no apparent reason. The fact that the water level is only every other contour line on a map, as opposed to it just forming on whatever level you want it to be on. That's equally as frustrating and annoying. How boring and bland some of these maps are, like the lacking of environmental features. Apart from Isla Nublar with its waterfall, and apart from San Marie Bay with its natural lagoon, I'm struggling to think of other maps that actually have environmental features that make them interesting, beyond sort of the height differences and stuff they might actually artificially come with. Where are the maps like Isla Tacaño when you had that big lake in the middle? Where are maps like Isla Matanceros where you had loads of waterfalls and you had that mountain, sort of the mount in the middle of the map which you had to build around? Where is Isla Sorna where you had the enormous plateau in the middle of the map which you then had to construct your park around? I think Jurassic World Evolution 2 has created a lot of very bland, boring, unimaginative, very realistic, but very bland maps, which I think is another reason why people are kind of asking for big ones. I don't think people actually want big maps. I think the real thing that people want is they want maps that are enjoyable to play on, which look good, that don't have a lot of artificial barriers put in place to prevent them enjoying the map, like the jagged borders that make absolutely no sense, where it's wasting space that we could gain by just having a smooth border. So yeah, that's just a little attached side on there that I think I would like any future Jurassic World Evolution 3 to show off more imaginatively styled, more nice looking maps, as opposed to the range of very open, very flat maps that we have in this game, in the second game at least, which they're easy to build on, but just kind of boring. That's just my hot take on the question of we need bigger maps. However, let me know down in the comments what you think about the idea of building, of having bigger maps. Do you want bigger maps in the game? Do you think it's unreasonable to have bigger maps in the game? What would you prefer? Would you prefer to have bigger maps, or would you prefer to have more decorative, stylized, actually designed, well thought out maps? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you are new to the channel to help us grow. It's been a bit of a slow year so far, but I'm hoping that we can pick it up towards Christmas. And I will see you in the next video and the next hot takes video. Until then, stay safe and goodbye.